hosts are a bunch of long-time fishermen who decided to get in the kayak fishing world, and guess what? They're taking you along for the ride. So buckle in and welcome to Paddle and Fin.
Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jay.
Yeah, buddy. Jay in the house. Got two Jays in the house this evening, boys and girls. We got none other than JP, a.k.a. Jason Paszkowski, right? I didn't butcher that.
Close enough, man.
Yeah.
He almost didn't want to say it.
Yeah.
Jason P.
The way I always have to explain to people, it's passing a ball to a cow with a K that's on skis. And everyone remembers it from that point on.
We'll just call him Ski for short.
Hey, not the first one.
Paszkowski.
Yep.
But Jason reached out to us after our little episode with NRS over on the Final Cast. I've known Jason for a bit here, and he's one of our Rocktown guys on our fishing team. But he also works for the fire department, and he reached out bringing up some interesting points on safety, rescue, cold water stuff. So we wanted to bring him on and talk about some of that stuff this evening. Hopefully we can save a life or two for some of you folks that are out there on the cold water fishing your little hearts out. Props to you. I'm a wuss. So...
Nut jobs. That's what those are.
But yeah, Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely, dude. So we'll start off with the age-old question. I know you know how this goes. How you got into kayak fishing and fishing in general, man?
Sure. Yeah, I've been fishing since I could walk. My dad's a fisherman. Started off fishing with him for a while. Boat fishing, shore fishing. When I was about 10, 11 years old, me and my cousin, we got an old school Coleman John boat, the big plastic ones that were indestructible. So we were out in Michigan, Gobles on Sweet Lake. Fished that lake pretty much my entire teenage years. And then me and my cousin bought a boat together. We went ahead and fished out of Tracker for, and then it was 2017. I bought my first kayak, and I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. I bought a Viper from Menards. Little sit-in, took it down the Des Plaines River, paddled around, and fell in love with it. Upgrade to the Vibe, Sea Ghost 130. More modification to it to adjust to fishing. Started fishing tournaments this year, and then once getting on with Rocktown, got into O-Town, the Predator PDL, and that's what I'm pushing right now. Chasing after mostly bass, but I do like to go after northerns. And then once a year, head down to the Gulf and do some fishing for orders out in the Big Blue. Actually headed down to Texas in January to go chase after reds out in Corpus.
Nice. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I know you got a special place in Jay's heart because you mentioned pike in the Des Plaines River. So,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. If you guys need a moment for a second, feel free to take it.
Yeah. Just for backstory, me and Jay live pretty close to each other.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we know the spots.
We know
That's
the
right.
spots. Well, I think I'm going to go out with Jason because Jay doesn't know the spots from my experience, just saying. But
Right.
let's get into a little bit of your background with the fire station, man. So how'd you get involved with that, and how did your whole safety rescue background come up in that?
Sure. Just a little bit of my credentials. I'm a Chicago fireman. I've been a Chicago fireman close to 4 years now. Before that, I worked in the suburbs. Worked for a town, Lyons, Illinois. Been there for 10 years. I started there when I was 19. Been something I've been wanting to do ever since I was a kid. My uncle by marriage, he was a fireman in Michigan for that same town where our lake is. He made up to the rank of deputy chief. When in the fire department, there's different disciplines aside from firefighting, and water rescue is one of them. Being in Lyons, we have the Des Plaines River that runs through the town. We also have the Chicago Sanitary Canal that runs through. So we do get water rescues and water recoveries. It has slowed down significantly over the last couple years, but when I first started, we were doing 4 or 5 water-related calls a year with the department itself. So with that, I went ahead and went for specialized training for water rescue operations, which is a state of Illinois fire certification on that. And in that discipline, it teaches you how to rescue and also self-rescue yourself if you had to make entry into the water. From that point on, like I said, we've had 2 successful rescues in Lyons. Fortunately, a lot of the times with what we deal with is a lot of after the fact. It's a lot of recovery, so that plays a role into it too. But the skills that we're going to talk about tonight all come into play when it comes to extricating somebody out of the water or to your vessel.
Dig it.
Yeah. And on top of those skills as a fireman, I'm also a paramedic as well. So I've been a paramedic for 9 years.
Is that a requirement of being a fireman? Because I think it is, like, locally around here.
Yeah, so within the inner city and the suburbs, most require you to be a paramedic or minimum EMT, depending on the department. The further you go out away from Chicago, the less that's required. But it's growing more, especially over the last decade. It's grown to where having your EMT basic is the bare minimum requirement to get on almost any fire department.
Nice.
Gotcha.
I feel safer when I fish with you now. I didn't know all that. I knew somewhat of your background, but I didn't know that much. So, yeah, anytime you want to fish, dude, I'm down. But, yeah, man, so I know you had reached out, like I said before, and you were like, hey, man, I think there's some beneficial topics that could be brought up here, and we'd love to come on and chat about them, man. So, I guess let's start with, like, if you're by yourself, you fall out of your boat, things like that, man.
Yeah, so actually the way you look at this and you break this down, if you're by yourself, number one, what are you fishing? Are you fishing a river? Are you fishing a lake? Is it deep? Is it shallow? So these are questions you had to, or these are things you have to take into consideration if you do fall out your vessel. If you're in shallow enough water, let's say in a lake, and you can stand up with a nice firm bottom, go for that first. Then be able to push yourself back into your vessel. You had mentioned quite a bit, and this is a practice that we frequent commonly, is re-entry from the water back into your vessel. Always practice that. There's no reason not to, especially in the off season. But let's say you're deeper water in the lake. If you do fall, number one, your PFD. All right, your PFD is going to be what's going to hold you afloat. Right now, with the water temperatures and the air temperatures not being at 120 degrees total, your body's going to start taking on hypothermia faster with the cooler weather. So first thing is always to remain calm. But you have to act fast. If you have a calmer state of mind, more likely going to survive your situation versus if you panic. People drown because they panic. So when you emerge into the water and you're going to get back, a couple things to remember when you have your kayak set up. Your kayaks are set up for the most part for safety. Any type of handles towards your center can act as a way for you to grab on, to clutch onto your vessel, to either get on top, or another option is if you're close to land, swim back to it with it. But if you're going to make your reentry, remember using those handles and using the most sturdiest points, which is the center of the kayak, is going to be the way to get back on that vessel. Now, colder water, your body's going to be going to the shock, and you're going to realize that you thought you had upper body strength, but you're not going to have that same amount of upper body strength that you necessarily have. So if you can at least pull yourself up, you don't have to pull yourself on, but at least up enough out the water, so then on your PFD, everyone carries a whistle. Blow your whistle. Start making noise. Start trying to grab the attention from anyone who can hear you. If it comes down to it, and it's survivalist, where no one's around, and you're in that moment where you're going, oh, crap, the best you can do is, if you can get your kayak over, flipped, and get inside, go for it then. All right? If that's your only means for survival, flip it, get back in, because then hypothermia at that point will set in within 5 minutes. Get inside the kayak. Let your body calm down, get back to shore. Now, if you're going that far offshore, though, we all know United States Coast Guard requires you to carry a radio. That's your way to signal for distress. That's your way to get help out to you. That's going to the far extreme, but let's take it back some. Let's say you're within half a mile of shore. All right, half mile ashore, even quarter mile ashore. If you can get to your vessel, and let's say you can't flip it, but you can move enough to swim, grab it, swim back with it. If you're by yourself, because the faster you can get out that water, and that, like I said, your vest and your kayak act as your buoyancy. The faster you get out that water, the faster you're going to stop the process of hypothermia, at least through submerging. There's other things to worry about, such as hypothermia with the wind and the air temperature blowing on you. They'll also lower your body temperature, but not as fast as being immersed in the water. But the faster you can get to that vessel and get out, the better off you're going to be. Now, if you're in a river, and Jay knows this just as well as we do because we've had this conversation before, first thing you should be doing is checking the flow rates. All right, check the CFSs. If that water's ripping and if it's raging, and you have no business being in there, don't go. Don't be stupid about it. But if there happens to be you have a flow, water temperature is cold enough, and you get in, most rivers are pretty shallow, or you will find a point where it's pretty shallow. Find that shallow spot and make the work easier for you. Get to that kayak to get it flipped, get to a shallow spot, flip it. Most of the time, you're no more, depending on the size of the river, most rivers are probably 200 to 300 foot span in either direction from land. So you don't have that far to go. If you get to, it doesn't matter if it's a true landing or not, just enough to get on land, so that way you could start signaling that you're in distress. But if you're in a situation where there's current flowing underneath you and it's moving faster than you can move your kayak or get yourself together, just like you're taught in swift water, lay back and let the current take you with your feet up, head back until you can get out of that current. That's a situation when you come into a river. But now, like I said, we talk about the rule of 120. If anything is above 120, or if you're in the warmer water and you can get yourself back and it's shallow, by all means. You're not going to be fighting hypothermia. You're going to take a dunk, but you're not going to be panicked because your body's not going to that shock. You're going to have more time to take care of what you have to do. But for those who are out right now, just be smart about it. That's number one, is knowing your limitations. If you think you could do it and you've never done it before and you're by yourself, you should not be in that situation. That's what it comes down to.
Excuse me.
Yeah, totally agree with that, man. And then, going back to, trying to get somebody's attention, that's why we all have to have a whistle on us at all times, so Make sure you have a whistle. I know some guys carry air horns, things like that. So anything to grab the attention of somebody when you're out on your own. I mean, if it's the middle of July and it's 100 degrees out and the water's 70, 80 degrees, it doesn't matter. But this time of year, not very many people are out having barbecues in their backyard. So if you need help, the louder you can be, the better chances you are of maybe getting a hold of somebody's attention to get some help, for sure. So, yeah,
very much.
I dig it.
And also too, like you guys talked about in the last episode with this layering, starting with base layers and layer to keep you warm, preparing that you may take an immersion. Don't wear anything kind of that's gonna weigh you down, and wear enough to where if you are going to take a dunk, that if by the time you get to the water, because what's going to happen is, especially if you wear base layers, a lot of them come with fleece, so you're going to your body's going to entrap that heat through the fleece, but everything that wicks off is going to stay off on the outside to keep your body warm. Invest, like they said in the last episode, you're going to invest for your life.
Yeah.
If something happens to you, there's no price tag to have your life taken away from you because of hypothermia, because you're dressed the wrong way.
For sure. Totally agree with that, man. Yeah, and like you touched on, using wool base layers versus cotton or something else. That's another huge thing, because that cotton is going to absorb that water and not want to evaporate. Fleece, wool, things like that are going to want to dry out quicker and get that cold water off you and kind of, like you said, take that internal body heat and warm you up a little bit.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and there's that saying too, like a lot of people may not even know about. It's like cotton kills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
and again, like we talked about too, when your mind's going to a different state. So the last thing you're not even thinking about is what you're wearing, and you're trying to swim to shore. You're trying to get to your kayak. You're trying to get yourself out that water. You're already weighed down. Your body's already weighed down because it's taken on that hypothermia. You're just adding more to the situation by wearing cotton at that point, and you're going to be struggling. That, like I said, nobody wants that.
No, and then and I've heard from Ken Wood, who went in a couple years. He went up at the national championship up in Kentucky Lake. And he was saying that for the first minute, he was freaking out. Your body goes through that shock. You can't think straight, and he actually ended up spending a lot of time in that water without a dry suit on in 30-degree weather. The water was extremely cold. It was snowing while we were fishing.
Oh, geez.
On the day he went over. And the only reason why I knew about it is because a lot of the Massachusetts boys were in different spots, and I didn't know that Ken had connection with them, but they were telling me our buddy just went over, and then we hear about the whole story. But he was one of the lucky ones. But he was saying it was so cold, it was such a shock, and he didn't really know what to do. But he had to lay on his back, and he actually had his phone out, and he called some of his friends while he was floating down the river,
Yep. And that brings up another point about how important it is to wear your flotation device. Because let's say you can't get your kayak flipped. Let's say you drifted away from your kayak. Whatever the situation may be, right? This kayak's out, your vessel's out of the situation at that point. Now your body's in that water just like he was for a certain amount of time. The one thing that's going to keep you afloat, even if you were to go unconscious, is that safety vest. Hands down, 110%.
Mm-hmm.
And not just a safety vest, but a safety vest that is fitted properly for you as well. Because if you're wearing the wrong size, it's not going to do you any good.
No, I agree. And I know me and you have seen you know, people go out on these kayaks like in the late fall out on the displays, and you're, you know, vest is unzipped. They're in like a hoodie and jeans.
Yeah.
You know, and people don't realize like there's some holes out there. You can get caught up. You know, it's like it's shallow in some spots, yeah. But I mean, falling in's falling in. You know, I mean, you're still going to be again wearing cotton, basically. You know, denim and cotton. Cotton. So you're going to be super cold, man. It's like, you know, people just don't. You know, they just go out there risking it. It's like, man, it just ain't worth it. You know, and I know they're not prepared for it.
Oh, and that's just it. It's the situation is, especially if we've been doing this, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And just like any situation, you're not expecting it to happen when it happens. So everyone's thrown off guard. I had it happen to me this year. Luckily, I was very close to shore. I was at the Lamont Quarries, and I was fishing right where the launch is. I don't know, about 100, maybe 200 feet away from the launch. And I turned around to grab something out my backpack. And I must have turned, when I turned to my side, I must have turned hard enough that I slipped out my seat and didn't even realize it, because the next thing I know, I'm up in the water looking up at the sky.
Oh, man.
You forgot you weren't 150 pounds.
Yeah, it just went whoop. But to that point, you know what? And what I was able to do, instead of trying to, hop back in my kayak, I just swam myself right to the shoreline, right to the dock, and made reentry right there. It was middle of April it happened. Water temperature was in mid 40s or so. Air temperature was in the 60s. So yeah, you still had that factor, but I was still dressing it appropriately. And like I said, I didn't completely go under because my all that water came up to my my vest and held me right there. So I didn't completely duck or go down. And like I said, just swam myself right back to shore and made reentry. So.
You were in a dry suit then too, right?
Similar to yeah.
Okay,
I didn't have a full dry. I had
the bibs.
The bibs all the way down, and then I had water resistive top on, and then PFD.
Did you have the belt like going on?
Yeah.
So you got some extra flotation from your pants too, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Those bibs are retired now because they dry rotted down around by the ankle, so they started taking on water.
Yeah.
And that's where we actually walked into the new sidewinders this year.
Yeah.
Well, and there's that argument from a lot of people because this undoubtedly is going to split the field, 50-50. There's going to be people going, well, I use neoprene waders all the time. And people are like, you don't have to worry. If you go in, it's, the neoprene will float. And they're right to an extent, if you use your belt correctly, but you're still taking on water.
Yeah.
Into
those
the
waders are going to fill up and weigh you down real quick.
Yeah. And I know people that have had to exit those things because in cold water circumstance, like winter wading, and had to like get out of the waders because they took on so much water.
Oh yeah.
And that's not even, not in a kayak rather, but wading, but sorry.
Right. And the fastest areas where you're going to lose heat from your body, essentially is your core. But when you go to your extremities, so your feet, your hands, and your head is the most important place, is where you're going to lose heat from. Mm-hmm. That's a lot faster, especially if you're standing in boots that are attached to your waders. Your feet are soaked. Your body's losing that heat right there and then. And then with convection going on, with the air blowing on you, you're lowering your body temperature.
Yeah. So. And I could say too, after seeing it in firsthand, up there in Idaho, fishing the Snake River and watching my friend flip a Jackson Cuda, and like instantly, but he had a full dry suit on. He was coherent in less than 30 seconds. I mean, there was that initial shock of like, oh my God, and some choice words. But I was right there. He put his hand on my yak and he was floating from his PFD and his suit. And he was able to regain just, total acknowledgement of what was going on, where we were, what was, what we needed to do within a minute of that time then. And then we just started to get to work, and he wasn't, I mean, we just kept fishing after that. I mean, it was a little freaky for me, because I, full disclosure, was not properly attired, and it freaked me out because the Snake River, it was cold. It was November. The water's super cold. I mean, it was a super windy day, but I mean, my point I'm trying to make is that the dry suits make a huge difference in your well-being, out there in the water, anywhere you're at.
And prior to us having this conversation, I was telling Brian a lot what we use when we have to do any type of entry into the water are the Mustang ice suits. They're primarily used in ice water rescue, so it's the same way to design the full dry suits are. You have the neoprene neck, you have the neoprene around the wrist with the rubber gloves, and then everything you're pretty much in a big plastic suit for the most part. But that is the true proper way that you are going to protect yourself from the cold weather, especially if you had to take a dunk. But it's bulky, and a lot of people find that it's an inconvenience. And you guys talked about that with NRS the last episode. They are now designed more to be more comfortable, more suited, more fitting versus what we used to have for protection, or what we have to use for our own protection if we have to go in to make a rescue as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked to the fire chief out here in Rockford. He comes in all the time to Rocktown, and they just, I think you told me too, you guys are using one-piece Mustang survival suits, right?
That's exactly what.
Yeah, that's what Rockford Fire Department's using. I know those things aren't cheap, but
big yellow Humvee suits are what.
But the one thing I wanted to touch on too, for those folks that didn't hear that episode with David Fuke from NRS, when you go into that cold water situation, you kind of want to stay in that water for a minute, right, to calm your heart rate before you climb back out, because like you mentioned, you're going into shock. So you want your heart to kind of slow down. Don't jump right back into your boat right away, as much as that's going to be your instinct. You kind of want to sit there for a minute, right, and let your heart rate come back down.
Yeah, most definitely. And then like I said, we're talking single. If you're a single person out there on the water, which, again, like we mentioned, know your limitations. If it's cold like this and you're going out, have a partner, have somebody out there, because majority of the time there's not going to be a lot of people out. If you're just going to brave it by yourself and you don't have somebody with you, don't plan on having somebody else out there. If you pull up and you see there's nobody there, signs are, and it's cold like this, you shouldn't be out there either. But if you do, go with somebody, because that's going to be your lifeline, and that'll bring up a whole nother set of things to do when you're with the partner. That increases your chances of survivability.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great segue, man. So why don't we jump into that when you're with somebody else and jumping in to save them.
Sure. Yeah. So, Brian, you see my setup quite a bit, and what I carry on the back of my chair. I have a 75-foot bag of polypropylene water rescue rope. Polypropylene, the rope will not sink in the water. That material has it float on top. And that's for both my own personal safety and for rescuing somebody else. So if someone does go into the water, we are always taught in the fire department, reach, throw, row, go. If you can reach the person with an object, try that first. If you cannot reach the person and you could throw them, like your rope, throw the rope to them. Most of the time, how you always want to do this, and on my YouTube video, we're in the process of making some demonstration videos on this. So look for those to be up soon. But you're going to have a vest on. Just put your arms up. If you're the person in the water, the person in the kayak, just throw the rope right between their arms. It'll land on them for them to grab. Now they have a lifeline to hold on to. If you can't do that, bro, if you can paddle to the person safely and get them to the side of your boat or your kayak or your vessel from that point. But let's say they go in, they're unconscious, and you have to get them out. Really got to think about what you're doing here and what your circumstances are. The last thing you want to do is make an entry and put yourself in a situation as well. So, with that being said, using that rope can really come into a benefit, especially if the person goes unconscious. Okay? So, if you can paddle to the person safely and the person's unconscious, whatever the case may be, whether it's medical related or if it's related from trauma, such as him striking his head on an object when he went into the water, use that rope to help bring him to your vessel. All right. And what you would do with that rope is make a girth underneath his vest. Come up underneath his vest through. You're not going to choke him because the rope's going around the vest. Pull the tension and pull that slack up to where he's sitting against your kayak, enough to where you're not going to fall in, but enough to where he's suspended there, and you could get him back to shore. This is not going to be fast by any means, especially from a kayak, especially if you're paddling, because now you're going to have to break your paddle down. One hand, have him to your side, the other hand start going. But you're buying the person who went in time. Do the same thing he would if he went in. Take your whistle. Start blowing on that whistle. Start signaling with flares. If you have an air horn, start hitting your air horn. Let others know if they're around that you're in trouble. If you have your phone because you haven't went into the water, start calling 911 right away so we can come out there and get to you. All right? Don't expect to get back to shore super fast in this situation. But what you are doing is, if that person is injured, you're saving their life, number one, but you're buying them time, because now you are taking the advantage of your own human propulsion to bring this person to shore, versus if they were to have to wait for the fire department to come for them. You've already saved that step. Or if the fire department gets there, you're that much closer for that person to get out the water by the time they get there. So again, I carry it because it could save somebody's life. And I also carry it because if I get into danger, if something happens, I get into some type of trouble, I can if I need to. And also use that to flip my kayak, or if I need to do whatever. It's a utility there for me to use as well. So very, very useful, very beneficial, and I would always recommend carrying it on your vessel. United States Coast Guard requires vessels to carry it in their boats on waterways. They do not require it for kayaks, but it's always a great idea to have one.
Totally agree with that, man. You mentioned flare guns. Are you carrying a flare gun on your kayak?
You know what? I have, and I got the little revolver style one.
I'm going to get one. You want to have flare gun wars on the next river trip?
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry,
July
man.
all over.
You know,
that's a little
like,
kid.
Why not bring Roman candles? I mean, let's go.
I was just gonna say, remember being kids that had Roman candle fights?
It's on like Donkey Kong.
No, Jason, I don't remember that. I mean, I was quite the idiot when I was younger, but I never did that.
Come on now.
Oh man,
pretty good fireballs. I won't say I haven't ran from a couple, but
yeah. No, that's cool, man. That's good stuff. Yeah, I know. I think I forget where we were, man, and I saw, and we saw them at Rocktown. Any kayak shop's gonna have a, that rope, and it'll come in a bag. It's condensed. You can buy it. It's fairly cheap, I think, from what I remember. But just having that rope, man, I mean, there's multiple utilizations for that rope. in any event, not only safety rescue, but, survival situations if you were to get stranded, things like that. So, but I know I saw it on the back of your chair and I was like, what the heck is this, dude? What do you got back here? 6-pack? He's like, no, dude, it's my rope, my safety rescue bag. I was like, oh, cool. Well, if I fall in, I know I'm good. So, yeah, man. I think it's cool, man. I've thought about it since you and I had that conversation of just picking one up and just having it in the boat when I'm out fishing. Only makes sense.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not. It goes back to what we always say. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And
Totally.
you know what? It doesn't have to be. It could be in the summertime. Someone flipped, and they, let's say we're ledge fishing, right? And they're in the shallow part of the ledge, but when they flip, they get to the deeper end. They may not know how to swim. They're freaking out. It's right there for you to throw them and get them back to the shallow point and be done with it.
Well, and I think a lot of people too aren't going to realize that, especially if you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s, you're probably not as active as you once were, and you may not be hitting the pool as much. And if you get into the water and actually try to swim, it is quite exhausting.
Sure.
I mean, yes, you've got the PFD on, but I mean, that's probably like one of the roughest full body type scenarios where every appendage has got to be working overtime, and you can get so exhausted. And if you're freaking out, you're going to get even more exhausted, which, if you got your PFD on, you're going to be cool as long as you relax. But if you don't have a PFD on, that's when the drowning comes in.
Yeah. Totally. Well, I mean, I don't know if I've shared this story on the podcast, but I had my first run-in with rescuing another kayaker, so to speak, over this past summer / early fall. Took a gentleman out that wanted to learn how to kayak fish. Never been in a kayak. Older gentleman. Took him out here on my local lake. And, we went through a bunch of safety stuff, paddling, things like that. Started fishing. We had some wind that day, and we were fishing my little honey hole offshore spot with, trees and stuff, and sunken trees. And the wind was blowing us. He was in a much different boat, so it was blowing him past me a little quicker than what I was moving. And I heard a splash behind me, and I thought this guy finally hooked into a fish. And I was like, sweet. And I turned around and looked, and I just see his head popping out of the water. I'm like, oh, that's not good. I'm like, hold on, I'll be right there. Went paddling over, and I mean, luckily enough, I think the water temps were like mid 60s. Air temps were right around 70. So, we're about 130. But, it's a situation I had never been put in. But being that I've taken some safety rescue classes through my local paddle shop, I kind of knew what to do. And I went paddling over there. And again, this dude has never been in a kayak, and he went to stand up to relieve himself from some morning coffee, and his balance wasn't there, and he ended up falling out of the boat. So, basically pulled our two boats up next to each other, put a paddle across him. I held one side of the boat. He went to the opposite side, went to reach over to grab and pull up, kick his leg in, and kind of rolled into the boat. And, that's something too, man. Like, in the summertime, just and you're out screwing around, fishing kind of sucks. Go drop your gear in your boat and practice that with a buddy. I mean, I know we all say we're going to do it and we never do it, but it's something that you guys should try doing. Or like I said, go take a safety rescue class from your local kayak shop. Go on ACA's website. They do safety rescue classes all the time. Usually they're like 20 or 30 bucks. Takes like 2 hours of your time. But at the end of the day, it could save your life or a friend of yours life, or somebody you don't even know,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my little tidbit, my little run-in. Guy went to take a pee, fell in, and had to save him from his pee. So, I mean,
Yeah, it's
Wrong
like, dude,
day to do that.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting though, because like at that certain moment, you're just like you have a rush of adrenaline, like, oh crap. I remember paddling because I wasn't in the Blue Sky. I was in, I think it was in a Jackson Liska. I went paddling over there as fast as I could, and just getting him back into that boat as fast as I could. And it was the same thing, right? So we were in 9 to 10 foot of water, and he had struggled getting back in the first couple of attempts. And I said, well, what I could do is you could hold on to the boat. I'll paddle us up closer to shore so you can get some footing and, climb back in that way. And we ended up getting him in without having to go through that extra step. But, that was definitely an option that we had looked at. And communication with that other person is key, because if not, like Jason said, you could be put in a situation where now you're both in the water, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to do stuff certain ways, it could cause you to roll or flip or fall out. So taking some of those extra steps and those extra procedures, so to speak, that have been set up for safety rescue can definitely make all the difference in the world and make the job of getting the other person back in the boat a lot easier.
Definitely. And you know what? I just wanted to touch on this beforehand. So I did reach out to the ACA, to do both the I sent them my credentials to see if they would grant reciprocity for what my certifications are, to have the instructor level for rest or for emergency rescue for water for kayaks and canoes. I haven't heard back from them yet, but again, a lot from what I saw from their curriculum is the same disciplines that we've gone through that certification. And bring it to the point of you're talking, there's a lot of Jay said and you said there's a lot of older folks in who are into kayaking now for fishing or health benefits or whatever the case may be. But what we have to do too is we have to keep in mind and think about what medical problems that they could have while on a kayak as well. And it's going to sound morbid, but you may have someone who might have a heart attack, might have a stroke. They're at that age, and they're at that age where this can happen to them. And this is where taking these classes and practicing these techniques are really going to come into play. Because if someone goes into cardiac arrest, right? They're completely unconscious. They're like a wet limp fish. So now it's up to you to get them out the water, because why do they fall out the kayak? Well, because they had a heart attack. Now they're unconscious. They're limp in the water. Now it's up to you to do what you have to do to get this person either back to shore, or if you're that far away, get in touch with to start the emergency procedures. But if they have a stroke, another part to having a stroke is you lose whatever side's affected. You lose feeling and control on the affected side of the stroke. So now this person only has one side of their body they can use to help you with if they're in the water. And you have to remember too, they don't have control, so they're going to be wanting to lean over and this is where keeping their head above the water, keeping their vest leveled with them, those are all considerations that we have to take in as well. Also, if someone gets injured, so let's say they do submerge and it's in shallow water, right? They strike their head on a rock or a log, or they have a head injury, or if they have some type of ortho injury from going into the water, anything that involves the spine as well, we got to take precautions to not have, to not worsen the injury. So trying to keep their head level, trying to have them not move their neck as much, because if they start moving their neck after striking their head, they could potentially become paralyzed.
Right.
At injuries if it's that serious. And again, we're talking about, this is worst case scenario. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be somebody falls out their kayak. You laugh at them. All right, get back in. But when it comes down to someone being seriously injured, we want to help them, but we also got to consider too, little things. You don't have to be an EMT. You don't have to even be first aid certified. But if you can recognize little subtle things about what's going on with this person, you could also save them from further injury and do the right thing when you go to rescue this person from the water.
Yeah, it sounds like there's gonna be a lot of stuff to consider. I mean, to your point too, river versus lake, current, versus no current, and everything else that's in between, the weather. I mean, there's a lot to consider. Definitely a lot to consider.
Yep, situation dictates all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I can say from seeing it happen in front of me, it freaks you out. Even when you're, on top of a kayak and perfectly safe and you see somebody go in, everything just goes blank, and it's weird because at that time too, I was holding on to 2 heavy duty rods. We were sturgeon fishing, so they're big rods. And one of the lines was actually tied around him that I had, and I had to you have this dilemma. It's the stupidest thing, but you're like, I'm holding $300-$400 in my hand, and in both hands are taken up right now. I'm in a pedal drive. It's 40 feet of water. The current is racing. The wind is actually pushing the current the other way. He starts freaking out. I'm tangled because he's had something similar happen to him, so he's panicking from a past experience, and now he feels lying on him. And I had to make a decision. I dropped the rod. I just let it go, because obviously stuff that, inanimate objects, they have, don't mean anything in a scenario like that.
Yeah.
And I had to assess the situation with him panicking, but also knowing he's in a dry suit and he's going to be okay. He did go on. His head went under, though. I will say that. But, it freaked me out. It hit me to the core. Brian knows.
Yeah.
Steve knows, who I was with. Dude, it almost makes you want to cry. It seriously jacks you up. And then you realize your own mortality also. So many things are going on. You're like, I got to save him. Don't worry about the kayak. Don't worry about the gear. Who gives, who cares about this stuff? And, that was the first thing. I was right there. He put his hand on there. I calmed him down. We swam the shore. The kayak was still floating. He just happened to have this massive hole in it that from something he had installed. So this kayak was sinking as we were doing this. And we almost had to make the decision just to let the damn thing go. But we were close enough to shore. And the Snake River is no joke. It's very deep, very rocky, and it was just a sketchy. We're in the middle of nowhere. So there's nobody to help. It's just us, and it's just crazy. It's the point I'm trying to make. You really got to compose yourself and you got to prepare. And this was cold water, not warm, but it ups the ante a little bit. And only thing I could say is just be prepared for the worst. That's the best you can do. And, just try to just keep calm the whole time, just know that you're, as long as you're there for the person, you can get them to shore, you can take care of everything then. And we had spare clothes in dry bags too, just in case, within the hull. So, but yeah, it was just a sketchy situation, man. It'll mess you up. I honestly didn't want to fish anymore. I was like, I'm done. I was that freaked out. I was like, let's just go. I'm out in Idaho. I took a trip. I'm like, nope, I'm good. Let's go watch some TV. Let's go have some beers. I'm like, this is scary,
Yeah, well,
You know,
not only that, but that water out there was moving at like 20 or 30,000 CFS, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I think we were well, yeah, the part we were at wasn't that fast, but I mean, it was definitely the winds were around 30 to 40-mile gusts. I mean, literally the current was like the wind was blowing the current the other way. You could see the waves going upstream or upriver rather. And it was a very I mean, it was so bad, like in a pedal drive, I literally got out and walked in the river because I had let's call it NRS the bibs on, and I was walking in the river because I couldn't pedal like against the current. I couldn't paddle, I couldn't fight it. And I just was like, screw it, dude, I'm walking. So I mean, of course, that was right after the traumatic experience. Like my whole body was just out of whack. I couldn't breathe right. I was freaking out. I was still freaking out. All I wanted to do was get back to the car. I was like, I'm just so done with this. I'm like, let's go. And it was, I don't know. Like I said, it was an extreme situation.
Yeah.
And I think we handled it pretty good, and, I learned a lot from that, and I learned how quick you can flip over. Now, mind you, the guy I was with is always on the Snake River. He fishes for sturgeon all the time. He's always landing 9-foot, like 8 and 9-foot sturgeon by himself. And this particular day, he got a little cocky, just got a little complacent. And the minute I saw the bottom of his boat, just saying his name, he was already in the water.
Yeah.
It was already done. The kayak completely flipped. So I mean, it can happen in an instant, and you gotta be ready.
Yeah. It'll happen quick, man.
Yeah.
For those listening right now, watching the YouTube the version of this, or listening on the podcast channels, what Jay experienced, that's a textbook, what we're always taught, how to self-rescue and what to do and rescue with a partner. And I really want, if you can go back and rewind and listen to what he said, really listen to what's going on there. This is what you have to prepare for, regardless. I mean, yes, situations dictate, but again, like Jay had no idea this was going to happen. You never know when, but it's, like we said, it's a matter of if, or it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it happens. And what are you going to do? So don't be complacent on practicing doing re-entry into the kayak. Don't again, he was on the river. He was with somebody who was experienced, somebody who knows that river like the back of their hand.
Right.
That person still got into trouble. No one is everyone's susceptible to the same circumstances that go on. So for those who are listening, no, you're not Superman. You're not invincible. It could happen to you. It could happen to me. It could happen, and like I said, it came close to happening to Jay. Anyone can be in this situation, and you really, really had to be ready. And you know what, Jay? Thanks, man, for sharing that. I know you said it's hard, but people need to hear this. People need to hear. This is the stuff people need to hear that we don't necessarily talk about in the kayak community, because we like everything that's awesome and action and good results, but nobody ever talks about the bad side, and it's very much kept in the shadows until something bad happens, and then it all comes out. I just saw another article for another kayaker who drowned, because of not being prepared, not wearing a proper, not wearing a PFD, going out without a partner when conditions were, where they had no business being on the water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, I think that this episode, we usually talk about fishing and everything, but guys, really, really think about the reality of the situation that goes on. We don't want to see it. We want to put it away. We want to have a good time. But good times turn into a very intense situation really fast. and we had to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, just being prepared, I mean, if you have no clue and that situation arises, I mean, you're basically both screwed, right?
Yeah.
Not only is the guy that falls out going to be screwed because you can't get back in, you can't help him, you can't assist him, but you're going to watch your friend die. That's going to mess with you for life. So, I mean, I don't know, just my 2 cents.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
No, I was just going to say it's not worth it, man.
No, even with my experience, I can't explain to you how remote we were.
Yeah.
You get up into those hills up in Idaho and on that snake.
Middle of nowhere.
I mean, we're not accessing this water from public launches. This is on private land. The only people that really even know you're on that water are the people that live on the properties, but they're not watching for you, and I'm telling you, man, if it had been like me going in, the story would probably be a little different, and who knows if I'd be here. I mean, because I was wearing a hunting jacket, man, and I should have been wearing like the second part to my bibs, but I forgot them back here in Illinois, but I still went out, and that jacket was super heavy to begin with. If it would have got waterlogged, this is like your typical bone dry duck hunting jacket from Bass Pro. It's a heavy jacket, and that's what like freaked me out.
Sure.
Because Steve goes in now. If I went in, he would have been freaking out. You know what I mean? And you don't to your point, Brian. You don't want to see one of your friends die. And you know what? And I think we're really just tired of hearing of these foolish choices that some of these kayakers are going out and doing, and going fishing. And then guys taking their kids with no PFDs. And we all know how that worked out. It's like, just stop. It's like, and I'm not saying I see people, I just want to lecture,
right.
But they're not going to hear that if you do that. And how do you even approach that? I mean, it's so difficult, but somehow you got to pass the message on, because it just sucks. It just seems like now there are more people dying on these kayaks than I've ever noticed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that comes with the growth of the sport and not enough education going on out there. You got these big box stores that are whoring off these cheap, crappy boats. People are picking them up, and they see, oh, this is going to be a great time, but they don't know how to paddle. They don't know the proper gear to wear, and that's part of, you got a 16 or 17-year-old kid at, box store X who doesn't know a lick about kayaking, let alone safety rescue, or anything about a boat in general. That's who's setting these folks up. So I mean, I get it, big box stores can sell whatever they want, but there's a reason why kayak shops are in place, so they can point you in the right direction and things like that. And I mean, if you want to buy a boat from a big box store, that's fine, but actually look and do some research on what you're getting into. And I think that's the reason why you see so many folks dying, because it's not the guys that are fishing the KBF Trail Series or the Hobie Series that are necessary. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are some boneheads out there that aren't wearing PFDs when they're not in a tournament or whatever like that. But, the folks that you're really seeing on the news, on all your different local news stations, it's just some schmo that went and picked up a $150 Viper kayak from Menards. Sorry, I'm not picking on you, Jay.
I have one in my backyard right now.
I know, but right, like I mean, let's face it. Like, I didn't know a damn thing about safety rescue when I got into this, but obviously, as a little time went on, I was doing more and more research as to, different things and how to be safe on the water. And that's the thing too. You got guys coming out of boats where they're used to, it's got a ladder on the back to climb back in if you fall out, right? You don't have that on a kayak. I mean, maybe I can put one on my Blue Sky, but it's one of those things, it's just not something that's talked about, and you're seeing more and more of it. And I think it's great that our sport is growing, but at the same time, that education has to keep up with that. Otherwise, you're going to keep hearing these news stories. I mean, the one that totally haunts me is from talking to our friend Richie Lockery down at Table Rock. He's out there fishing. I mean, Jason and I had fished the tournament down there, and that's a big lake. Yeah. There was like 7 guys paddling out to an island, and not a single one of them had a PFD on, and they were in like 100 and some foot of water.
And if nobody has, if people aren't familiar with Table Rock, I mean, it's a man-made lake, and you literally can go from shoreline being 5 foot, and then you'll watch your depth finder. It'll go from 5 to 20 to 40 to 100 within the matter of 100 feet. I mean, it's no joke. It really. And then that day we were out there on Sunday, we wound up pulling off the water because it was
bad. The wind
was really bad with the wind out there.
In the waves. I mean, it was like I was in a washing machine, and I was in the blue sky, and I was like, "This is crazy." I couldn't imagine what it was like for Jason being in the old town. You know what I mean? So. But, I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, to touch on that point, I think we as kayak anglers and just kayakers in general have a responsibility when you see somebody out there, give them a pointer, lead them in the right direction. So that way, you're not reading about them later on the news. Or, there's that old thing too, like you go to the launch and you're like, yeah, these conditions suck, but you're going to leave and you see another car pull up and it, they don't have a Jackson or a Old Town or a Hobie, it's a cheap $150 boat. Those folks ain't going to think twice about jumping in that water. They're going to unstrap their boats and jump in. Just go down, have a conversation with them, say, hey man, I wouldn't jump in there if I were you. And if they ignore you, at least you tried, man. It's peace of mind, but I don't know. You just never know.
I mean, I'm just going to guarantee anybody out there. I mean, granted, we're talking about a very broad spectrum of situations here, but
sure,
the PFD being one of the most important pieces of your safety equipment. I'm going to tell you right now, if you put it on the front of your kayak underneath your bungees, I can guarantee you will not have time to grab that PFD. You are screwed.
Yeah.
You better learn how to swim. I mean, it's no joke. We preach this, and I know this is another one of those things where people are split down the middle. Obviously, a lot of us, the tournament guys and, the team guys, we know that, for one, it's a requirement, but you get used to wearing it, and then it's not a big deal. You hear people, oh, it's hot. Yeah, it's hot. We know. We deal with it too. Just wear some proper garments underneath that can help you aerate your PFD. Maybe upgrade your PFD to a better one. I can't say it's going to solve your heat issues, but it's definitely going to make it a little more comfortable. If you have it unzipped, it's not going to work. You'll probably slip out of it. I'm going to guarantee that. Unless you bear hug yourself immediately, I don't know what's going to happen to you, but having it not zipped is not having it on. It's not good enough. Don't expect a miracle to happen if you're not wearing this thing the right way. I mean, I'd hate to be the what's it called? The PDF Gestapo, but you gotta pay attention to this, and you gotta tell your friends. I mean, I just had a conversation this weekend over Thanksgiving, excuse me, with my sister's husband, and he lives off of the Kankakee River, and he wants to start kayaking out there. He's more of a hunter, a trapper. He wants to start getting into this. And I'm like, all right, man. I was like, we're just chatting back and forth. And then I came to the PFD thing. And I said, hey, I was like, if you get one, I was like, wear a PFD. I was like, do not wear it unzipped. I mean, I was very stern. I was like, I don't want to hear about you falling in and getting hurt or getting in some trouble because your PFD came off. I was like, I can't be associated with that. I was like, I'm telling you right now, you're going to zip that thing up and you're going to be, if it's hot, who cares? You know what? Take a dunk in the water in some shallow water. I don't know. Cool yourself off, whatever you got to do, but just be prepared for it. But I just can't stress that enough. I mean, everybody, I hear in some of these groups, man, you guys just think you're bulletproof, and you're not. You're just not. None of us are. And I'm not the all around expert. You know what I mean? I'm going to get into trouble one of these days too. I mean, and even to Brian's point, Brian knows that well, Jay knows too, but I mean, I'm usually on the Des Plaines River. There's these these grooves that are cut out of that solid limestone that are filled with muck, which is quicksand. I have literally almost sunk with my waders on in that stuff. So you're never safe from any of this stuff, whether you're in the kayak or not. So you got to be paying attention. And I was luckily near land. I literally had to lean back to get out of this thing before I kept sinking, because it was winter, it was the water was freezing, and I knew once it went in, I was screwed. I mean, I would have had to run barefoot, dude, on all that grass. That would have sucked. I mean, I don't know what I would have done. I really don't, but I mean, it's like, the point is like, just pay attention and just be as safe as you can. Because God, guys, we got to stop killing ourselves. Like, literally.
Yeah.
You have a responsibility to get back to your family.
Absolutely.
It's your responsibility. You cannot go out there and just wing it. It's just so irresponsible.
And that's Jay's law. That's Jay's law.
That's my diet trap. Sorry.
Take that to the bank. No, that's cool, man. I totally agree with everything Jay just said. I mean, I think this has been a great conversation for sure. A lot of good, important stuff. I know I learned a couple things from what Jason was talking about. But I mean, at the end of the day, like Jay said, the most important thing is getting home to your loved ones, right? I mean, what's a 2 or 3 hour class, or watching a bunch of YouTube videos on safety, rescue, things like that. I mean, to be able to make that happen at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So with that, Jason, why don't you let folks know where they can follow you, shout out to your supporters, things like that, man?
Sure. So you can follow me at 4-Star Fishing. It's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everything's 4-Star Fishing. Just want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Rocktown Adventures. You guys are awesome. Buddy. Wicked Weights, TRC Covers, and then you know what? Everyone who's I've been building a good rap over the last couple of years. So everyone who's followed me, who stood behind me, and who knows who I am and supports me through all this, thank you guys so much. You guys, it means the world to me. And you guys for having me on, man. Been listening to you guys since the origins, and you know what? You guys are killing it out there with it. So good job, and congratulations on the 1 year that had just passed.
Yeah, man. We're about to hit 100 episodes for season 2. Well, actually, by the time this airs, we'll already be past it, which is pretty freaking crazy. Yeah, I threw some stats out there the other day, which was pretty nuts. But
saw that.
Thanks for the kind words, brother. We appreciate you. So
you guys are doing well. It's awesome to see.
Thanks, man. Well, we appreciate you, man, coming on and reaching out, willing to talk about this subject. I know it's not something that everybody wants to talk about or necessarily hear about, but I think it's important for everybody to hear. That's for sure. And thank you for your service, man, with the fire department. I mean, you're on the front lines, man, saving people every day. So that's huge, dude. So thank you for that. Definitely.
Thank you.
I mean, you got a better chance at saving Jay than you do me, just because I live so far away. But But
question is, am I worth saving?
He did land that pike right after it chased my lure.
It happens.
Oh man. Well, with that being said, guys, till next time, tight lines, smooth paddling.
This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.